Hello viewers, my name is Dr. Jessica Muthe of Elim Guidance and Psychological Services Center. Today I'll be talking about risk factors associated with suicide. But before I do that, I would like to define a few terms related to suicide. The first one is suicide. What is suicide? And suicide is death caused by injuring oneself with the intent to die. Suicide attempt is when someone arms themselves with an intent to end their life, but they do not actually die as a result of their actions. What about suicide ideation? This means wanting to take your own life or thinking about suicide. There are two types of suicide ideations. There is what we call active suicide ideation and passive suicide ideation. What is the difference between the two? Passive suicide ideation occurs when you wish you were dead or that you could actually die, while active suicide ideation is not only thinking about it, but also having the intent to commit suicide, including planning for it or planning how to do it. Now, researchers have found out that suicide ideation for general world population is 9%. Same research also indicates that adults of ages 18 to 25 years posts the highest population as compared to other age ranges in terms of suicide ideation. Now, that is an alarming statement, especially as far as our youths are concerned. You can see the age range is between 18 to 25. Other ages may also commit suicide, but this group posts the highest group in terms of ideation. Now, what are some of the risk factors of suicide? If somebody talks of risk factors, these are factors or characteristics or conditions that increase the chance that a person may actually want to take away their lives. They can be classified into three. We have what we call health risk factors, environmental risk factors, and historical risk factors. Maybe I look at health factors. What are some of the things that are in health situation or in health that may actually predispose a person or make somebody vulnerable to committing suicide? These are things like mental health conditions like depression. Depression actually leads to suicide a lot. There is a lot of evidence from research on that. Substance use abuse is also another risk factor under health factors. Bipolar disorder, which is a mental illness. Schizophrenia, which is also another mental illness. Personality traits of depression, moods, changes, and poor relationships. A lot is taking place in terms of relationships of late, especially among the couples, among friends, among boyfriends and girlfriends, that actually has resulted into a lot of suicide and even shooting oneself or shooting themselves, or maybe throwing themselves to the lakes, rivers, from high buildings, and so on and so forth. A lot is happening as far as conflicts in relationship is concerned, or as far as toxic relationship between friends is concerned. Now, we have things like also conduct disorder. This is a disorder that could also make one vulnerable to committing suicide. Serious physical conditions, including pain. When one has been in pain for a long time, at times they may decide that they they are actually going to take suicide as an option to end their lives. We have traumatic brain injuries. This has also a lot of other issues surrounding it, but people having that condition have also been known to commit suicide. That is as far as health factors are concerned. What about environmental factors? We have environmental factors that increase the chance that a person may take away their lives or may kill themselves. One of them is access to lethal means, including firearms and drugs. It's unfortunate that there is a lot of shooting of oneself among the people that keep firearms when they have challenges in life, when they have relationship breakups. A lot is happening, and there is a lot of there's a lot of suicide attempts, suicide ideations, and sometimes completely taking away their life, which is actually suicide itself. Now, what about prolonged stress, such as harassment, bullying, relationships problems, or unemployment? Maybe I pick on bullying, which could even be taking place in schools, especially like when Form 1s report in schools. This kind of a habit should be eliminated completely from our schools, and teachers can take care of that. And also parents at home can also take care of that in a way by advising or by counseling their children not to bully others in school. Bullying has been known to actually be put in the subconscious mind for a long time, such that even when you think the individuals have grown and they have left schools where they were bullied, still the whole thing recurs, and it makes people develop low self-esteem and hate themselves and finally take away their lives. We have relationship problems. I've talked a lot about, we have a whole video on, or I have made a whole video on toxic relationships in the YouTube and the effects of that on our mental and physical health. Now, what about unemployment, especially this time where there has been a COVID-19 scourge that has made life so difficult? People have been left powerless. They have lost business opportunities. They have lost their source of income. They have lost relatives who could have taken care of them. And a lot is happening in terms of mental health in the whole world or globally, not only in this country, but also globally. So, the other thing could be stressful life events like rejection, divorce, separation, financial crisis, and other life transition or losses that may have taken place in a life or in the life of an individual. That would predispose them to suicide ideations. Now, what about exposure to another person's suicide or graphic or sensationalized account of suicide? Research has a lot to say about people who have attempted suicide in the past. They say that once you attempt to commit suicide several times, there is likelihood of you one time taking away your life completely by way of suicide. So, exposure to another person's suicide or to graphic or sensationalized account of suicide is also another factor. We move to historical factors. Now, previous suicide attempts, I've already talked about that. People who have had attempts to commit suicide in the past, or who have had a lot of suicide ideations, whether passive or active, are likely actually to commit suicide with time. Family history of suicide. There are some families that are vulnerable to suicide attempts, suicide ideation, and complete suicide. They commit suicide because of the conditions or because of the situations in their personality. There are some personality traits that are more prone to suicide than others. And such families or such individuals from such families could actually have an history of suicide, ideation, or even suicide attempts many times. Childhood abuse, neglect, and trauma. Children sometimes are abused without parents knowing. Sometimes it could be abuse, verbal abuse, could be emotional abuse, could be psychological abuse, could be physical abuse by the house helps, or even other relatives, or in the school, or some other places. And sometimes they keep it to themselves and they are not able to share. And that can also cause suicide, neglect. In these days when we are very, very busy in making careers or becoming career people, sometimes we leave homes very early, we come very late, and we are not able to build that kind of a relationship where the children would tell us, or where the children would say what is it that they are experiencing can be dangerous times. And the children would develop or may develop trauma and finally commit suicide. Now, what are the warning signs to look out for in people around you, whether they are children or whether they are your friends, workmates, churchmates? What are some of the warning signs to look out for in people that are out or in people that are about or they may commit suicide? One of them is change in behavior, and this could be related to painful events that they have gone through, and loss that they may also have gone through, or change, and other factors like the way people talk. You may listen to them, and you may hear such statements like, if a person may talk about killing themselves more often, feeling hopeless, having no reason to live at all, being burdened to others, where they feel they are burdens even to their own parents. They feel they are abandoned to, to their friends, feeling trapped in some situation and they don't know how to solve it, or they have no solution to it and they do not want to share it out. Feeling trapped, that is feeling unbearable or getting unbearable, somebody who is in unbearable pain. It is good for people to support them so that they may not think of suicide and finally commit it. Now, we have warning signs in terms of behavior. The behavior signals, especially related to painful events or loss or change. Some of the behaviors like increased use of alcohol or drugs. The person all of a sudden changes and becomes such a user of alcohol and drugs until the relatives or the caregivers are surprised. Looking for ways to end their life. Sometimes they are all in the online, looking for methods on how to eliminate their life very fast. And since there is a lot of technology has improved a lot, sometimes one may not know what people are doing with in cyber cafes and also with their laptops and smartphones. A lot can be happening, but we need to look out and see whether the persons are okay. Withdrawing from activities, maybe they were in school and they decided not to go back to school, and there is a struggle between the parents and maybe the teachers and the friends. A struggle when they are trying to tell the person to go back to school, but they have not understood why they have withdrawn from activities like being in school all of a sudden. Isolating from family and friends. It is possible to get the children or to get the person just not wanting to be near the relatives or friends. Switching off their phones, or sometimes deleting even the numbers or the cell phone numbers of their parents. from their phones and not disclosing where they are completely, this can be a bad sign, or this can be a risk factor for people to commit suicide. What about visiting or calling people to say goodbye? They may call all their friends actually and tell them goodbye. And they may not even explain why they are wishing them bye, but they only are thinking of how, or they have suicide ideation. They want to attempt suicide. Giving prized possessions to other people, that means whatever they considered very important, they no longer value it, they want to give it out. It's good to check on that. It is a point of concern. What about aggression, where they become very aggressive and very irritated? Any attempt to discuss anything with them is not welcome. They become extremely irritable and very aggressive. What about fatigue? They are also said to be very fatigued, or they complain of fatigue, or they actually even look fatigued. Those are some of the risk factors that can be associated with the behavior or persons that would like to commit suicide. What about moods? People who are considering suicide often display certain moods more often than more often. Like, for example, they could have the mood of depression. Sometimes they could also be anxious. That is, they could have anxiety, loss of interest in almost everything, irritability, humiliation or shame, agitation, anger, relief that looks like a sudden improvement, which may not actually be true. And viewers, with what I have discussed, it is important for us to know that suicide actually is being committed even as I do this video. There is a lot of suicide attempts, suicide ideation, and even committing suicide that is taking place as we talk. Now, if you have somebody around you with such signs, kindly refer them to mental health specialists or mental health workers like clinical psychologists, counselors, psychotherapists, psychiatric physicians, so that they can be intervened for. It is important to know that suicide has many effects. Thank you very much.